Hi guys, welcome to the next video on the chapter Age of Industrialization. In the previous video we discussed about the setting up of factories in India. In this video we'll be discussing about the peculiarities of industrial growth in India specifically. Now, with the domination of the European companies in India, in Indian market, there was not a lot left for the Indian industrialists. So the European managing agencies dominated and wanted export-oriented products. So products like tea, coffee plantations, indigo, jute. So they were dominating these markets, and the Indian mill owners or the Indian entrepreneurs did not want to compete with them, with the Manchester goods as well. So when these products that were there in the Indian market, the Indian businessmen did not want to compete with them. The reason for that, the Manchester yarn was of very high quality and they could not compete with that. So they changed their strategy. What they did is, instead of going for the fabric, they went for the thread. So they started producing coarse cotton yarn, which is a thicker version of the fabric used for variety of the products. So this was of a lower quality, and hence they used it for domestic consumption and to export it to China. They could not export to the European agencies, European countries. Hence, they were using it for domestic consumption and China to avoid competition with the European companies and the European material. Now, this situation somewhat changed in the early 20th century when the Swadeshi movement happened. So, under the Swadeshi movement, people started boycotting foreign goods, and hence people started going for Indian made goods. So coarse yarn was more preferred for the Indian citizens. So they started buying these goods instead of going for the Manchester yarn. Now also the industrial groups of India, which were represented by the Indian entrepreneurs, they started pressurizing the government to increase import tariffs. So the cotton yarn from Manchester would get costlier. So this was the way through which they organized themselves to protect collective interests. So this is how they were working. Now, another situation happened in the early 20th century. The Indian yarn that they were supplying to China, that declined. The reason for that was the produce from Chinese and Japanese mills had flooded the Chinese market. So the Chinese and Japanese mills had started dominating the Chinese market. Hence export to China had also declined during that time. So there was a shift from yarn to cloth production as well due to Swadeshi movement, because now they could compete with the European companies, European material. Now, what happened during the First World War? First World War was a major event especially for the European countries. So a lot of their industrialists were busy supplying for the war. So this gave an opportunity to the Indian industries in India. So the situation was such that the British mills were busy with war production, and this led to the Indian industrial production boom. So the Indian mills had a vast home market in India, so they flourished. The Indian factories were called to supply war needs as well. Hence, their production even doubled, because they were supplying for the Indian domestic market as well as providing for the war needs. Hence, they ran multiple shifts. So they were making jute bags, uniforms, tents, leather boots, horse and mule saddle. So this led to a situation where these Indian mills started flourishing. And once the World War was over, the Manchester companies could not recapture the old position that they had. The reasons were many, one of them being that they could not modernize and compete with the US, Germany and Japan. US, Germany and Japan had taken a lead over the Manchester companies, over the Manchester material. Hence, they could not compete on the global level. And if you talk about within the colonies, the local industrialists have consolidated their position, and hence Manchester mills started dying a slow death. So they were not able to get the market in the global level as well as in the colonies. Hence they were losing out everywhere with various competition. Now, we'll discuss the growth of small scale industries in India. Now, even though we are talking about cotton mills, large mills, Manchester mills, this is just the 5 to 10% of the total production. The majority of the work was still in small scale industries. So the large industries formed only a small segment of the economy, most of them located in Bengal and Bombay. That's it. In these two major centers, plus Madras also some mills had come up, but majority the work was in small sector, small scale industries. Rest of the country, small industries were dominating. Only 5 to 10% people worked in registered factories. All others were working in small workshops and household units. So the small scale industries were beginning to flourish. Now, not all small scale industries were flourishing, of course, because the Manchester yarn which we discussed was of really high quality. Hence, the spinning workers, they lost their jobs. So the cheap machine made thread wiped out spinning. Spinning is basically converting from the thread to the fabric. So because of this reason, from the raw material to the fabric. Hence, because of the cheap machine made thread, this wiped out spinning. However, weavers who were manufacturing various cloths, they survived. The reason for that was that handicraft people adopted a new technology that improved their production without excessively pushing on costs. So they were very innovative in their way. So one of that was they started using looms with fly shuttle, which significantly increased their production. Hence, without increasing their cost, they were pushing up production. Then other small innovations were also used. Now they were competing with the mills. So they were competing their product with the mill product as well. Hence, they were with various innovations, they had started to dominate the Indian markets. Some weavers produced finer variety of clothes. Now, the cheap machine made cloth is different, and for the upper class generally, they were going for handmade products, and here the weavers had a significant advantage because they catered to the upper class. Hence, they had a stable demand. So finer varieties was stable, the demand for that. However, demand for coarser clothes, it fluctuated based on crop production and income yield, because coarser cloths is basically for the lower and middle class, and hence they depended a lot on crop production and income. Hence the demand fluctuated. Now, the mills could not imitate specialized weaves which the weavers had done, so they could not compete. So Indian mills could not compete with the weavers, hence the weavers actually flourished. So this is the situation of the small scale industries as well. So in the next video, we'll be discussing the market for these goods. Thank you so much.